You look at a litter of puppies, 6 of them, squirming over each other for space. You look at a nest of baby mice, a dozen pink bodies smaller than your thumb. Then you look at a human newborn, 1 baby, wrapped in a blanket, alone. Why is that the rule for you and almost never the exception? The answer isn't just biology. It's a trade a species made a long time ago, and you are still paying the interest on it today. Start with the obvious question. Most mammals can have more than 1 baby at a time. Dogs, cats, pigs, mice, rabbits. Multiple eggs, multiple pregnancies packed into a single birth. Humans almost never do this. Twins happen in roughly 1 out of every 30 to 60 pregnancies, depending on the population. Triplets are rare enough to make the news. 5 babies at once is so far outside the norm that when it happens naturally, without fertility treatment, doctors write papers about it. So what's different about you? Part of the answer is how your body decides how many resources to gamble at once. Researcher Robert Martin, who spent decades studying primate reproduction, described something simple but easy to miss. Litter size across mammals tracks closely with brain size and gestation length. Animals that produce many offspring at once tend to have short pregnancies and small, simple brains at birth. Animals that produce a single large-brained offspring tend to have long pregnancies and small litters. You don't get both. Evolution had to choose, and your ancestors chose brains. A human brain at birth is already enormous compared to body size. It keeps growing for years afterward. That growth is expensive. Not in money, in calories, in oxygen, in maternal tissue, in the literal architecture of your mother's body while you were inside her. Building 1 brain like that is hard enough. Building 5 at once, sharing 1 womb, sharing 1 blood supply, would be almost impossible to sustain. Here's where it gets stranger. You've probably heard the phrase, the obstetrical dilemma. It's the idea that human pelvises are shaped by 2 competing pressures. Walking upright wants a narrow pelvis for efficient movement. Birthing large-brained babies wants a wide pelvis for an easier delivery. The compromise, the story goes, was a painful, risky birth process unlike almost anything else in the animal kingdom. But not every researcher agrees anymore. Anthropologist Holly Dunsworth challenged part of this story. Her research suggested the pelvis isn't the main limiting factor at all. The real constraint, she argued, is metabolic. A mother's body can only support a fetus for so long before the energy demands of pregnancy exceed what her metabolism can sustainably provide. Human babies are born when they are, she proposed, not because the pelvis says stop, but because the mother's energy budget says stop. Add a second fetus, let alone 4 more, and that budget breaks far sooner. You were born early, in a sense. Compared to other primates, your brain still has an enormous amount of growing left to do outside the womb. A newborn chimpanzee is already more developed, more coordinated, closer to functional. You arrived helpless, unable to lift your own head, unable to survive a single hour without someone else's body heat and someone else's food. That helplessness is the price of a big brain finishing its construction after delivery instead of before. Now imagine 5 of you at once, 5 helpless, brain-heavy infants, each needing near constant physical contact, each needing to be fed roughly every 2 hours, day and night, for months. One caregiver cannot physically hold 5 infants, cannot nurse 5 infants on demand, cannot carry 5 infants through a landscape while gathering food, avoiding predators, and moving camp. Anthropologist Sarah Blaffer-Hrdy has written extensively about this. Human infants, she argued, evolved to depend not just on their mother, but on a wide network of caregivers. Fathers, grandmothers, older siblings, unrelated group members. She called this cooperative breeding. It's a strategy seen in only a handful of other species, mostly birds and some small primates. Humans, she suggested, could only afford such slow, expensive, high-investment offspring because the burden was never meant to fall on one person alone. Which raises an uncomfortable question. What would it even take, biologically, for a human to carry 5 viable pregnancies to term at once? The uterus itself becomes the limiting factor. There's simply not enough physical space or attachment area on the uterine wall to properly nourish 5 separate placentas through a 9-month pregnancy. High-order multiple pregnancies, the kind that do occasionally happen through fertility treatments, come with dramatically elevated risks. Premature birth, low birth weight, Complications for both the mother and the infants. The body is not built for it. It's being pushed past a threshold it was never designed to cross. Compare this to a species built the opposite way. A rabbit gestates for about a month. Her babies are born blind, hairless, and almost embryonic looking, but there can be a dozen of them at once. Rabbits play a numbers game, produce many offspring, invest relatively little in each one, and accept that most won't survive to adulthood. It's called an re-selected strategy. Quantity over quality. Humans do the opposite. Produce very few offspring, invest an enormous amount in each one, and try to make sure almost all of them survive. This is called a K-selected strategy. Quality over quantity. You are the product of a species that bet everything on making each individual count. That bet shows up in more than just litter size. It shows up in how long human childhood lasts. It shows up in how many adults it takes to raise one child successfully. It shows up in why, even now, in hospitals with all the tools of modern medicine, a woman carrying triplets is monitored more closely than almost any other patient in the building. Her body is operating near the outer edge of what human physiology can support. Here's the twist most people never think about. The instinct you feel when you see a single, small, extremely needy human infant isn't a flaw. It's a signature. It's evidence of a species that gave up quantity, gave up ease, gave up the six-at-once safety net that so many other mammals rely on in exchange for something else entirely. A brain complex enough to ask why it was born the way it was. 5 babies at once would have meant 5 brains splitting one mother's metabolic budget, one mother's arms, one mother's attention. Somewhere back in your evolutionary history, that trade-off failed more often than it succeeded, so biology closed that door. It handed you, instead, a single, slow-growing, expensive brain and made sure an entire group of people would be needed just to keep it alive long enough to use. You look at a litter of puppies, 6 of them, tumbling over one another. Then you look at a single human infant, quiet, dependent, staring up at whoever is holding them. That's not an accident. That's the cost of the mind you're using to read this sentence right now.